Ever had a weekend that starts ordinary but turns quietly unforgettable? I thought I'd just be at home catching up on rest, maybe sneaking a few hours of TV, but instead, I found myself rediscovering life, laughter, and the subtle magic of being with my son. What happened in those days off changed the way I looked at family, connection, and even myself, and it all began with a simple movie marathon. Don't forget, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and write in the comments which city you are listening from. This is very important for us. And now, enjoy listening. I woke up on Friday morning feeling unusually light. There was no rush to get anywhere, no early meetings to dread, no obligations beyond the walls of my own home. I had worked all week as a marketing consultant, shuffling through deadlines and conference calls, and for once, the silence of the house felt like a luxury rather than a test. I stretched, glanced at the clock, and smiled at the thought of having an entire weekend to myself and my son, Mark. He was 17 now, on the brink of adulthood, yet still, in these rare mornings, he seemed almost like the boy who used to insist on pancake breakfasts and Saturday cartoons. I poured myself a cup of coffee and peeked into the living room. The sun was sneaking through the curtains, painting golden stripes across the sofa where Mark was curled up with a blanket, phone in hand. He looked at me, half awake, and gave a small, sleepy smile. "Morning, Mom," he mumbled. "Morning, you," I replied, keeping my voice soft, careful not to disturb the calm in the room. There was a rhythm to our mornings like this, quiet, familiar, almost sacred. I suggested we make a plan for the day, and he immediately brightened. "Movie marathon?" he asked, and I laughed. Of course. That had been our tradition since he was 10. We'd pile on the couch, blankets and snacks surrounding us like a fortress, and let the hours slip by, punctuated only by commentary and laughter. We set up the living room like we always did, a big bowl of popcorn, soft drinks at arm's reach, and a selection of films that ranged from his favorites to mine. There was something comforting in the predictability, yet exciting in the way we critique each movie, teasing each other over questionable plot twists or bad acting. As the first movie began, I sank into the couch beside him. I could feel the warmth of his presence, the subtle rhythm of his breathing. In moments like these, I was struck by how quickly time had flown. The little boy who once clung to my side for reassurance was now a young man, thoughtful and observant, yet still willing to share these simple joys with me. We laughed together, sometimes silently, sometimes aloud, sharing glances that said more than words ever could. Halfway through the afternoon, Mark stretched lazily, his hand brushing mine as he reached for more popcorn. I felt a quiet thrill, a deep sense of connection that seemed to settle in my chest and refuse to leave. It wasn't romantic, never that, but it was intensely intimate in the only way a mother and son can be when they are truly present with each other. I noticed things I hadn't before, the faint freckle near his temple, the way he tucked his hair behind his ear when he was concentrating, the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed. Little details, small gestures, but together they painted a portrait of the man he was becoming. And in a way, I felt like I was rediscovering him, not just the teen, but the person he would be stepping out into the world as. By late afternoon, the light had shifted, brushing the living room in soft oranges and deep shadows. The house was quiet except for the movies and our occasional conversation, the sound of popcorn crunching, a sip of soda, or a comment about some ridiculous scene. At one point, Mark leaned back, his head resting against my shoulder, and I realized how rare and precious this closeness was. "I'm glad we're doing this," he said quietly. "Me too," I murmured, feeling a surge of gratitude. "I don't know if we do this enough." He shrugged, smiling, and for a moment, we were both content to just sit together, letting the quiet stretch around us like a blanket. There was a subtle tension in the air too, not uncomfortable, but charged with the kind of emotion that only comes from being truly present with someone you love. It wasn't dramatic or overwhelming. It was calm, yet profoundly moving. Each shared laugh, Each quiet observation, each small gesture of attention felt significant, like discovering a hidden depth in something familiar. By evening, as the last movie ended and the house grew dim, I felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and fulfillment. I had spent the day in the company of someone I loved deeply, yet it had been more than just companionship. I had reconnected with a sense of wonder, patience, and attention that had been buried under work, errands, and responsibilities. I watched Mark yawning, stretching across the sofa. "Think we should do this again tomorrow?" he asked, half asleep. "Yes," I whispered, "absolutely." And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the weight of the world pressing on me. I felt a rare, fleeting perfection, the kind that doesn't need to last forever, but is enough to remind you that love, presence, and connection are often found in the simplest of moments. The morning sun spilled across the kitchen table, warming the mug of coffee I held in both hands. There was a quiet magic in these moments, when the house was still and the day was full of possibility. Mark was already up, flipping through cereal boxes with a deliberation that made me smile. He had this way of taking his time, like he was savoring the ordinary, and somehow, I found myself following his rhythm. "Want some eggs?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though I knew we both felt the excitement of another uninterrupted day together. "Sure," he said, but he didn't rush. Instead, he leaned against the counter, watching me as I cracked the eggs into the pan. His presence was grounding, a comforting tether to the here and now. There was a subtle tension in the air, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the quiet awareness that these moments were fleeting, precious, and entirely ours. We ate breakfast slowly, talking about everything and nothing. Mark told me about a class project he was excited about, and I shared a story from work that had amused me. There was laughter, a few teasing jabs, and the kind of easy silence that only comes with long familiarity. The conversation meandered naturally, punctuated by small gestures, a hand brushing against mine, a shared glance, a smile that lingered a little too long. After breakfast, we retreated to the living room again. I suggested a new movie, one neither of us had seen before, and Mark eagerly agreed. We arranged ourselves on the sofa, blankets draped over our legs, a bowl of snacks between us. The room felt cozy, almost like a bubble, insulating us from the outside world. As the opening credits rolled, I glanced at Mark. He was completely absorbed, eyes bright, hands fidgeting with the blanket. I felt a swell of affection, a quiet pride in the young man he was becoming. Watching him, I was struck by how much he had grown, yet how much of the boy I knew still lingered beneath the surface. Halfway through the movie, he nudged me lightly. "Did you see that?" he whispered, pointing at the screen. We both laughed softly, leaning closer together to share the moment. The physical closeness was comforting, natural, and deeply reassuring. There was a rhythm to our interactions, a subtle dance of attention and care that didn't need words. After the movie ended, we didn't move. The room was filled with the fading sounds of the credits, the soft hum of the heater, and the quiet comfort of being together. I found myself reflecting on how rare this kind of uninterrupted connection was, how easy it was to let life's responsibilities and distractions pull us apart. And yet, here we were, fully present, fully engaged, and entirely content in each other's company. Mark broke the silence. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course," I said, curious but calm. "Do you ever feel like we don't spend enough time like this?" His voice was soft, almost hesitant, but there was a sincerity that touched me deeply. "I do," I admitted. "I think about it a lot, actually. Days like this remind me how much I've been missing." I reached out and ruffled his hair lightly, a small gesture that spoke volumes. "But we're here now, and that's what matters." He smiled, a mixture of relief and contentment, and leaned back against me. There was a warmth to the moment, a quiet intimacy that didn't need to be defined. We simply existed together, two people who loved each other and were learning to appreciate the small joys of life in each other's presence. As the afternoon light shifted, we moved from movies to conversation, talking about hopes, fears, and the small triumphs of daily life. Mark shared stories from school, dreams he wasn't yet ready to fully voice, and I listened, offering encouragement and gentle guidance. The exchange felt like a bridge between our past and our future, a delicate weaving of understanding and trust. By evening, the house was bathed in a golden glow. I could hear Mark humming softly as he tidied up, and I felt a profound sense of peace. These moments, simple, quiet, yet profoundly meaningful, were becoming etched into my memory. I realized that sometimes the most extraordinary experiences weren't the ones you sought out, but the ones that found you in the stillness of ordinary days. As we settled in for the night, I reflected on how much I had learned from just spending time with my son. Patience, attention, and the art of simply being present had become clearer to me in a few short hours than they had in years of busy routines. And I knew that these days, these precious pockets of connection, were shaping not only my relationship with Mark, but also the woman I was becoming, more attentive, more aware, more grateful for the quiet beauty of life. That night, as I tucked the blanket around us and Mark yawned, I felt a sense of completion, a quiet satisfaction that only comes from truly seeing someone you love and letting them see you in return. I whispered a soft goodnight, and he murmured the same, our voices overlapping in a harmony that spoke of trust, care, and mutual respect. And as I drifted off to sleep, I realized that these simple days off, filled with movies, laughter, and quiet companionship, had become something more. They were a discovery, a gift, and a reminder that the deepest connections often lie in the moments we least expect. The next morning, I woke to the soft gray light of winter filtering through the curtains. There was a chill in the air, but the house smelled faintly of coffee and something sweet from the muffins I had baked the night before. Mark was already awake, curled on the couch with a blanket around his shoulders, scrolling through his phone. When he looked up and saw me, he gave a small, tired smile that made my chest ache with a quiet, protective affection. "Morning," he said softly. "Morning," I replied, trying to keep my voice light. "Sleep well?" "Yeah, better than usual." He shrugged, and for a moment, I could see the boy he once was, the one who used to hide under blankets with a flashlight to read comics late at night. Now he was almost a man, but these glimpses of his younger self made me feel both nostalgic and deeply tender. We settled into our routine again, coffee for me, hot chocolate for him, and muffins that filled the kitchen with warmth. I watched him eat quietly, and for some reason, the silence between us felt charged, as if we both sensed the significance of these uninterrupted days. "Mom," he said suddenly, breaking the quiet, "do you ever think about how fast things change?" I looked up, startled slightly. "All the time," I admitted. "Every day. 1 minute they're little kids, and the next." My voice trailed off, heavy with the weight of years gone by. He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I feel that with friends too. Everyone's moving forward, but I like that we still have this." He gestured vaguely to the kitchen, the living room beyond, the house we had shared for so many years. "It feels safe here." I smiled softly, feeling a lump in my throat. It is safe here, and it always will be, as long as we're willing to be present for each other. There was a long pause, the kind that isn't awkward but reflective, where two people simply sit in each other's presence and absorb the quiet gravity of shared understanding. I realized in that moment that these days off, these hours together, had become more than just a break from routine. They had become a mirror. I was seeing Mark clearly, and in doing so, I was seeing myself more honestly than I had in years. Later, we moved into the living room, blankets draped around us, the familiar bowl of popcorn between us. This time, we didn't turn on a movie immediately. Instead, we talked, really talked, about life, about fears, about dreams that felt too fragile to share with anyone else. Mark was surprisingly open, and I listened, offering comfort where I could, encouragement where it was needed, and quiet support in moments where words felt unnecessary. There was a subtle tension in the air, a kind of emotional gravity that isn't romantic but is deeply intimate. I could feel it in the way our hands brushed when passing snacks, in the way our eyes met during conversation, in the unspoken acknowledgement that we were present for each other in a rare and unguarded way. At one point, he reached out and placed his hand on mine, lightly, almost hesitantly. I didn't pull away. Instead, I felt a warmth spread through me, a recognition of the bond we shared, a connection built on trust, respect, and a profound understanding of each other. There was nothing inappropriate about it, yet it carried an emotional weight that took my breath away. "I feel like I can tell you anything," he said quietly. "You can," I replied, my voice soft, almost a whisper. "Always." We spent the afternoon like that, talking, laughing, and sometimes sitting in comfortable silence. The house felt cocooned from the rest of the world, a safe haven where emotions could flow freely without judgment. I was learning something about patience, about listening, and about the kind of closeness that doesn't demand anything but presence. As evening approached, I realized that these days off had transformed into something more significant than I ever expected. They weren't just about movies or snacks or time away from work. They were about connection, understanding, and the quiet discovery of love in its many forms. Not the romantic kind, but the kind that shapes you, grounds you, and reminds you what truly matters. When the sky darkened and the first stars appeared, Mark leaned back against me, a small sigh escaping him. "Thanks, Mom," he said softly. "For everything today." I hugged him gently, feeling the familiar weight of gratitude and emotion pressing softly against my heart. "No, thank you," I said, "for being here, for being you." That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the hours we had shared, the laughter, the conversations, the quiet moments of reflection. I realized that what I had felt with Mark over these days off was something rare and precious. A full, unguarded emotional intimacy, built not on drama or conflict, but on presence, trust, and mutual respect. And for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to hope. Not hope for something grand or life-changing, but hope for more days like this. More moments where we could just be, together, discovering each other and ourselves in the quiet, simple, profoundly moving way that life often doesn't let us pause to experience. The last morning of our little retreat arrived slowly, the sunlight spilling gently across the kitchen floor. I brewed coffee and leaned against the counter, watching Mark move about the house with his usual easy rhythm. There was a quietness to him today, a kind of contented calm that made me pause and just appreciate the simple fact that he was here, and that we had spent these past days together in a way I knew I would carry with me forever. "Mom," he said, as I placed a cup of coffee in front of him, "can we just stay like this a little longer?" I smiled, my heart swelling. "We can," I said softly. "We don't have to rush back into anything. We can savor today." And that's what we did. We spent the morning in the living room, blankets tucked around our legs, a light snack between us, and no schedule to follow. Mark suggested a few more short films, and we laughed through scenes that were silly, awkward, or beautifully absurd. But in between the laughter, there were long stretches of quiet, where neither of us felt the need to speak, just letting the presence of the other fill the space. I realized then how rare and precious it was to have someone to share these moments with, a presence that was constant, unwavering, and deeply understanding. Mark didn't need to fill the silence with words, and I didn't need to explain myself. We just existed, fully and completely, in a shared space of trust and care. At one point, Mark rested his head against my shoulder again, and I felt a warmth spread through me that wasn't fleeting. It was steady, like the kind of security only love and trust can bring. I thought about the week I had just left behind, full of deadlines and stress, and I understood that these days, these small, unremarkable yet extraordinary moments, was the part of life I would treasure the most. "I'm really glad we did this," Mark said, finally breaking the silence. "I mean, I didn't think we'd just be like this, really, together." "I'm glad too," I whispered. "Me too." The honesty in his voice, the openness in his expression, made me feel lighter than I had in months. There was no need for grand gestures, no drama, no pressure, just a quiet, shared understanding that this time together mattered more than any event or obligation ever could. We spent the afternoon organizing the living room, putting away the blankets and snacks, but even in these ordinary tasks, there was a sense of connection. We joked, teased lightly, and laughed at the little chaos that had accumulated during our movie marathons. Every glance, every shared smile, every small touch felt meaningful, as though we were imprinting these days into our memory in ways words could never fully capture. As evening fell, I found myself standing in the kitchen, looking out the window at the fading light. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the heater and the occasional murmur of Mark tidying up. I realized that what we had shared over these days was rare, a full mutual understanding and appreciation of each other, unhurried and authentic. Mark came over and hugged me tightly, a gesture that carried more meaning than either of us could articulate. "Thanks, Mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "For everything. For this. For us." I hugged him back just as firmly. "No, thank you," I said, "for being here, for sharing this with me." Later, as I lay in bed, I reflected on the days we had spent together. I thought about the laughter, the quiet conversations, the shared glances, and the small moments of intimacy and understanding. These days off, which I had once assumed would be simple and ordinary, had become extraordinary, not because of anything we did, but because of the way we were present for each other. I understood something essential. Connection isn't about grand gestures or dramatic moments. It's about attention, patience, care, and the willingness to truly see someone else. And in seeing Mark, in being fully present with him, I had seen myself more clearly too. The week ahead loomed with its usual responsibilities, but I felt prepared, grounded in a way I hadn't been for years. I carried with me the warmth of laughter, the comfort of shared silence, and the quiet, unspoken knowledge that these days were a gift, one that would shape our relationship and my understanding of life for a long time to come. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I felt an unexpected peace. There was no need to cling to the perfect moment, no need to hold on to it forever. The value was in having lived it, in having been present, in having shared these days with someone I loved deeply. And that, I realized, was more than enough. Because sometimes the most profound discoveries happen not in the extraordinary, but in the quiet, tender, ordinary moments where love, presence, and understanding converge, and you finally see, with full clarity, the people you love and the life you've been living all along.